This is episode one of the Africa Hired podcast. And today I'm with my co host, Ayo. How's it going today?
It's going well. How are things going for you?
It's going pretty well. We had a lot of fun trying to set up this episode, right? Everything that could go wrong went wrong, but it's going to get better over time. So I'm really excited that we're actually doing this because we've talked about it for a while. So why don't you tell the folks, like, what is the goal of Africa Hired? Why are we doing this?
I think essentially what we want to do is kind of inform the diaspora as well as Nigerians or just Africans in general, really about um, ways to kind of pool resources and kind of become more effective in this growing economy. So whether that's like tech or healthcare or um, finance, like any way where we can kind of leverage kind of our knowledge pools and skills to kind of become more effective in the economy, I guess.
So you kind of talked about Nigeria, right? Both of us are of Nigerian descent. So usually when we think about Africa, we think about Nigeria first. But this is actually a podcast for Africa as a whole, um, to kind of take advantage of what's going on. So what do we have going on? Let's kind of talk about that. Um,
Go ahead.
you've had gig work or remote work. That was accelerated by COVID happening in the United States as well as around the world. So that's being taken advantage more and more by corporate entities or companies. You've had a lot of infrastructure development in Africa, specifically when it comes to internet availability and reliability. It's still not 100% yet, but it's better than it was before, right?
Mm.
So you have now the opportunity of Africans being able to take advantage of remote work. And in some cases, some people are very prepared for doing that, and some people are not, right? Because for whatever reason. So the goal of this podcast, among other things, is to kind of educate folks on how to best take advantage of those opportunities. Our brothers and sisters in India, our brothers and sisters in Malaysia, they've been taking advantage of this for years. Africa is now going to join in that bucket. Maybe one thing that we have going for us is the fact that we have a growing pool of young folks who are familiar with technology at a very young age and maybe can then take better advantage of that. But at the same time, there's nothing to be said. There's something to be said for not discounting experience that our Asian counterparts have had. So kind of want to make sure that we kind of even out the playing field a little bit and help Africans be better prepared for interviewing and actually getting some of those remote jobs and actually being effective at those jobs.
Yeah, I mean, and also if you look at kind of the demographics of Africa, demographics of India and Malaysia, like you mentioned, both have large populations of young people. Both kind of have young people already involved in tech, just not in sort of a monetary way. So now I think kind of the idea is to try to tap into some of the um, sort of the tech industry in the same way that India has, right? Where they now, if you call someone and support, it's someone in India. Like it's 24/7, right? Because the time difference. So I think definitely tapping into that is something that we want to do in Nigeria. Africa in general. I mean, obviously, I got the Nigeria bias a little bit, but Africa in general. But yeah.
Yeah, and the more interesting thing about that too is I want to kind of add into this is that there is a big demand for capabilities that are related to what you would consider social media, right? Video
Mm.
editing, audio editing, graphic design. Apart from the other traditional tech like programming that we are going to talk about. So there are a bunch of different opportunities there that people can take advantage in based on their interest. And one of the things that actually inspired me to do this, I'll tell you a story, is I was visiting Africa a few years ago, probably 2 or 3 years ago, right? And I was talking to a young lady who was graduating that year. And when I asked her what her future plans were, she said she was going to go learn to become a tailor, right? And when you spoke to the next person, they were saying, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to go open up a shop." When they call it shop, it's kind of like a small corner store or grocery store. Um,
Yeah.
and what occurred to me when I talked to a few people is because of some of the economic challenges that were going on, is that a lot of people did not necessarily expect to use their qualifications as a college graduates in the workforce, right? They were looking
Hmm.
for alternative means to basically make a living. But some of those means that they were looking at, in my opinion, we're looking for what we would call skilled trades over here,
Yes,
right? And
vocationals. Yeah.
my question to them, which I didn't ask, but my question, thinking about it, was, hey, why would I spend 4 years, if you're in Nigeria, probably 7 years with all the strikes and whatnot, to go get a college degree, and then go spend another 6 months to go learn to become a tailor or something else? That could, I don't know what the timeline for doing that is. Why
Mhm.
not just go do that if that's what your plan is? And right, so a lot of people are getting educated because that's what they want to do, but they're not really seeing a lot of opportunity in the economy to actually land a job. And one of the ways that could be solved would be saying, hey, let us not just look for jobs within the local economy, right? If you're in Nigeria, the Nigerian economy, let's look for jobs in a global economy, right? But if you're going to do
Yes.
that, you have to understand that now you're competing on the global scale and you have to be prepared for that.
Yes. And I think what you mentioned is kind of showcases like the failings of like most African governments in general, because the idea is usually that you get higher education, and then you have a job waiting for you after you graduate. But that's usually not the case, right? So a lot of people, so essentially, a lot of African economies are essentially held up by many entrepreneurs, like people who, with a 4 year degree, 4 year technical degree, but they end up either opening up a shop or becoming a tailor or becoming a mechanic, right? So the vocational trades are where are easy for you to kind of set up work on your own. You don't need someone to give you work. You don't need to carry around your resume. You kind of just can find a little area and kind of set up shop, right? So we have all these basically highly degreed individuals with no work, or they end up having to take, as you mentioned, a job in sort of a skilled labor area, right? So I think with the advance of technology now, with um, uh, basically being able to work on things from different parts of the globe, I think now we have all these highly educated people who can kind of start competing for jobs in different countries, different continents, things like that. So I think definitely AfricaHired is a way to kind of bridge the geographical gap between job seekers and job owners, I guess.
Mhm. One thing that I thought was pretty interesting is actually your story, right? So you and I have had conversations, obviously, before this. You work as a contractor, primarily
Mhm.
remote, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, you were not in Africa. You tried doing the Africa thing for a while, and I'd like you to maybe talk a
yeah,
little bit about what happened there. But you're not in Africa at the moment. But you are essentially doing what we're trying to explain to other people to actually take advantage of, right? You are doing it here in
yeah.
the US, and obviously there are advantages, like infrastructure advantages, that kind of
Yeah,
come into play there. But there is nothing that prevents somebody from doing what you're doing overseas, right? And
no,
like we
not
talked
at all.
about, you actually tried to do it from Africa. And if you could tell the audience a little bit about what your thoughts were when you tried to do that.
Yeah, so I worked remotely from Nigeria specifically a few times, actually. The first time was a bit more difficult just because of network issues and things like that. So, I mean, obviously the infrastructure. But the last time I did it was much better. I'm not sure what MTN has going on with the 5G towers now, but the service was actually really, really good. So it was the first time where there was really no lag from a technical perspective, perspective, and me working geographically so far away. And then just the time difference adjustment was um, essentially the only thing. And even then, for nowadays, like they're talking about 9 to 5 uh, work days. But I think if you start hiring people in time zones that are like so different, you can maybe start talking about a 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. work day, right? Where you stop at 5 p.m. and then you have overlapping shifts, all right? Which is essentially what tech support looks like in India, where you have people who do 12-hour tech support on one hemisphere, people who do 12-hour tech support on another hemisphere. So in this case, though, it would just be taking place on the continent of Africa, not Asia. So
Mhm. And you've worked on a variety of teams, right? Didn't you tell me that one of the team members you were working with was an Egyptian in Egypt on the team
yeah,
at the
yeah.
time?
So the one of the teams I worked on was probably the most diverse team I ever worked with. We had one member who was working from Egypt. I had another member who was working from Costa Rica. I was working from Arlington, Virginia at the time. And then we had another member who was working in New Hampshire. So we were all kind of working in different countries, but we all did like the 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Work schedule. And kind of due to like the advancement of cloud now, we were all able to kind of work on a single project on different computers in different places in different countries. So I think, and it was all real time, right? We didn't have any issues of lag or any issues of in terms of project deliverables. So I thought it was pretty successful.
Yeah. So one of the things I think we should also elaborate on, I would say, would be this whole concept about thinking that remote work is just tech, right? If it's not tech work, it cannot be remote, right?
Yeah.
With the infrastructure benefits, with the proliferation of cloud technology nowadays, you could do a variety of things remotely now that you couldn't do before. Actually, I think one of the things that I was introduced to when I visited Nigeria about 2 years ago was this group called I Just Got Back, right? So you had people who were part of the diaspora who were actually going
Mhm.
back to Nigeria, right?
Yeah.
Because they took a remote job and they were actually staying in Nigeria full time, right? And a lot of them were not in tech. When I say tech,
Yeah.
I would say traditional tech, programming
Mhm.
and things like that. So there are a lot of opportunities here, and then you also have the opportunity of the fact that you have this growing population, this growing talent-based, very well-educated folks in Africa who are looking for
Mhm.
opportunities. And it seems to us that this is basically two different opportunities that are going to come together to make one interesting whole. So that's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think oftentimes when people think about job outsourcing, they're thinking about manufacturing work, right? They're thinking about, something was manufactured here and now it's being manufactured in China for $1 an hour. But another way to look at it is there are roles in like digital, advertising, marketing, all these roles they're not traditional tech roles, but they can be done. They don't have to be done at a physical location. You can essentially outsource it. Um, I know for a lot of the work I do, I usually um, when I'm looking to kind of like looking for a certain skill set, obviously there's someone in the US I could hire to do the job. But there's usually someone in Nigeria or Africa in general, who's just as skilled and will do it for a lot cheaper. So I tend to go the second route. So whenever I kind of have need for a different skill set, I usually just find someone, usually in Africa, to do the role.
Yeah, so you bring up a really interesting point. So I was thinking about this probably a few months ago now, and I was thinking about remittances, right? And we know that the
Yeah,
remittances has been increasing and increasing, and this is personal remittances, right?
yeah,
A lot of people in the diaspora have family members back home, all right, on the continent, and they're trying to do their best to support them in different ways, right?
mhm,
But this also provides an opportunity for actually, instead of it to be just purely charity, it can actually be mutually beneficial, right? I
yes,
could, for example, hire people back home to do different things. It could be something as simple as a virtual assistant. It could be something
mhm,
more complex. Pay them a good living, right? I'm not saying cheat them
yes,
out of anything. Pay them a good living, but they're
mhm,
also producing something and providing value to me, right? And it makes it mutually beneficial because the remittance situation sometimes it feels as if it's one way, right? You're not really getting
mhm,
value back. Obviously, your
yeah.
family is doing well, so that's important. Um, so that's actually pretty key that I was thinking about of how do we support people back home, but
Yes.
also provide economic value by doing so.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
key
A
thing I
lot of
wanted to kind
yeah.
of point out there, I should say, is that because of the exchange rate being in the favor of the US dollar in this case, right? You can provide jobs for multiple people
Mhm.
with what would be considered smaller amounts of money here, right?
Yes.
So I don't know what the starting salary is in Nigeria or some of the other countries in Africa nowadays, but one of the things I would ask is, hey, maybe with $1,000, $1,500 investment, you may find that you are able to pay somebody a good starting salary for 8 months to a year, right? And
Yeah.
if that's
Yeah.
true, that's absolutely fantastic, right? They get a benefit, you get a benefit, and hopefully the combination of you both would actually provide something that you can actually market in the economy.
Yeah. I mean, currently the minimum wage in Nigeria is about 80,000 naira a month, which after conversion is maybe about $60, probably a little less than that, maybe $50. a month or something like that. So over the course of a year, that's about $600. So if you think from an economic point of view, like it makes perfect sense to outsource it to someone who's just as skilled, but whose cost of living is much cheaper, so you can pay them a little bit cheaper. And what you mentioned about the personal remittances is actually a great point, because a lot of the issue we have right now in Africa in general is a lot of the personal remittances are unstructured. Like what I mean by that is people send money back to their family members. Their family members do stuff with it, and then the money kind of just disappears, right? Like you don't really see the effect of the money in the economy, in those economies. And I think kind of a situation where you're able to kind of structure the remittances in a way where you can have more, they're more guided, or there's more like visibility into where the money is going and things like that. It's more feasible to kind of build projects in Africa without wondering if somebody's embezzling the money or wondering where the money is going, right? Because in all honesty, these are large amounts that are entering these economies every year, and they just kind of disappear. So where's the money going? Like these are the kind of questions we kind of have to wonder. But I think a way in which you kind of can have guided remittances is through job outsourcing, like people whose jobs and salaries are tied to whatever money you're sending back. And I think we'll start seeing kind of the effects of the money in the economy, basically.
Mhm. So one thing I thought we should mention, because for clarity, is that we recognize the fact that yes, the minimum wage set by the government is about $80,000 or $70,000. Sorry, 70,000 naira,
Yeah,
eighty
yeah,
thousand naira a month. But we also recognize that pretty much no one can live on that amount, right? Things are a lot more expensive in the local economy. That's actually not a living wage. So,
no,
but we're just using it for the sake of this conversation and doing some meta calculations about how this could play out from an economic standpoint. The other
mhm.
thing I was going to say, tied to what you were talking about, is that what we're talking about here is not new, right? The government is starting to take a look at it. You were telling me about the
Yeah,
website that the government set up recently. I don't know how well they're promoting it, but that's something that's taking place. We're seeing a lot more people trying to do other stuff, right? Last time I spoke to one of my cousins, she told me she did this course online on her phone as a virtual assistant. So obviously, there's
mhm.
enough interest here that's going on, and we can start to figure out how to best take advantage of those opportunities rather than making the mistakes. And the goal thing that we have here is that our Indian brothers, our Filipino brothers and sisters, our Malaysian brothers and sisters, they've already done this, so they've already made those mistakes, and we can kind of learn from them. Kind of a similar way how Africa kind of went from skipped the traditional land-based telephone into the mobile age and kind of
Yeah,
sidestep some of the problems or challenges that came with having the traditional land-based telephone. Um,
mhm.
so that's pretty key. So, kind of talking about the podcast itself, this is something that we hope to do um, very frequently. I would like to say weekly, but maybe it's going to be more like bi-weekly that
Mhm.
we're going to be releasing it. We're going to be doing a couple of things. We're going to be talking among ourselves, talking about some of the opportunities and challenges and how to navigate those. There are obviously a number of challenges, and we kind of need to discuss those. We're going to be talking about how to prepare for interviews. We're going to be talking about how to actually be effective when you get that job, right?
Mhm.
The worst thing to do would be to get a job one day and then be fired the next because you're not effective at the job. Um,
Yeah.
so we're going to be talking about that, but we also would be talking about talking with people who are actually doing remote work right now from the continent and see what their experiences are. Like, how are they doing it? What are the challenges they are facing? What could make it better? And that's something that we're going to do, as well as take questions from the audience, right? So we're going to also be talking about opportunities, what certifications to get for some different careers, take questions from folks on the continent as well as folks in the diaspora or on the global economy who are looking for folks that are that could help them with doing certain things. I'm really excited because it seems as if we're going to be going through the broad space of this global economy, and I'm really excited to actually see Africa take a good and meaningful role in that. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think I with kind of the our population and where technology is at. I think this is sort of the best time to um, to start anything basically. I think previous years the environment probably wasn't as conducive. But I think currently this is probably the best time to start looking at ways to kind of grow the different economies and jobs and things like that.
Okay. So where can people hear about us, right? We're going to be on all the platforms for podcasts. If you're using a Android phone, that's probably going to be Google Play for most people. There are other ones out there. We're going to be on those as well, but Google Play, I think, is the most popular one. If you're using an iPhone, we're going to be on Apple Podcasts as well. This is going to be a video podcast, but there will be audio versions available as well. And then we're also going to be on YouTube, right? So you can also connect with us on YouTube. Um, we're not going to be doing live in the very near time. We need to kind of figure out our systems, but there may come a time where we actually do live and we actually take questions from the audience live. So that would be pretty cool to actually get to that point. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can connect with us through those different avenues that I just spoke about. We have email. It's called AfricaHired@gmail.com, right? So AfricaHired@gmail.com. Send us an email or send us a note. We'll love to talk to you. And we are currently setting up our social media channel. So hopefully by the time we air out this second episode, we can actually provide all of that information to you guys so you guys can get in touch. So I am really excited. First episode down. We had a lot of errors, but I think it's a lot of fun. I'm really excited about this. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think you just got to get through the first one.
Yes.
And after that, it just gets a little easier.
All right. All right. Have a good one.